All right, and welcome to our service. We want to welcome those of you who are joining us on Facebook. We typically have about as many joining us on Facebook as we have here on our church campus, but today we have gone back inside, so we've got a lot more people inside than we have been in the last several months, and we're glad to have all of you and glad to have those of you who are at home. But I've saved a couple of announcements for now. One is that it's time to be thinking about Samaritan's Purse Christmas shoeboxes again. And the boxes are here. If you've been in the Family Life Center in the activity room, you've seen the pallets that are there. Those are Christmas shoeboxes that have come from Samaritan's Purse. We're going to do it differently this year. We're not going to ask you to take them home with you and bring them back, but you can come up here, schedule a time with Antoinette, and there's certain procedure that has to be followed. It's a little bit different from last year, so let her know if you can help come and put the boxes together. There's a message that has to be taped to them, and there's just different things that have to be done, so please let her know. The other thing is I want to make sure that those that are listening at home, that they know that we are observing communion today at the end of our service. And I hope to be able to stay live on Facebook with that. So if you're at home, you might want to get something, a cracker or some juice or even water, something that can represent for you the body and the blood of Christ. And we'll do that at the very end of our service. All right, from Philippians chapter 1, we're going to start with verse 9. The message today begins in verse 11, but that's one long sentence, so we need to back up and get Paul's thought here. Philippians 1, beginning with verse 9. Would you stand with me as we honor God's word? And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless until the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. Now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. Because of my chains, most of the brothers in the Lord have been encouraged to speak the word of God more courageously and fearlessly. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so in love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached, and because of this I rejoice. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice. Thank you. You may be seated. The date was Thursday, December 17th, 1903. The place was a lonely beach near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. There on the sand was an odd-looking machine, the creation of a couple of brothers who were possessed by what other people called a crazy idea. But at that moment, Wilbur and Orville Wright did not allow what other people said about them to rob them of their well-deserved elation. You see, for more than 2,000 years, men had been trying to put together some kind of contraption that would allow a man to fly like a bird. And they didn't have any success. But now, the Wright brothers had put together a machine, a flying machine that had just flown for 120 feet through the air, gliding just a few feet off the ground. Now, it had stayed aloft for only 12 seconds, but it was enough to prove that man could indeed fly, as opposed to floating like a balloon or gliding, that he could fly in a power-driven, heavier-than-air machine. 12 seconds. That's certainly not a very long time, especially when you consider all the time the Wright brothers had spent in experimenting, failing, scratching their heads, and trying again. they did everything they knew to do. They had consulted all the published works of those who had gone before them, who had tried to do the same thing. But they didn't make much progress. Listen, they built more than 200 different styles of wings and tested them in a homemade wind tunnel. But they didn't have any success until they went back to the basics. They went back to the basics of aerodynamics. They went over everything that had been published and discovered that someone had made an error in a mathematical equation. So they rewrote the equation and started over. And by going back to the basics of aerodynamics, they were able to construct a wing which would work with air pressure to lift a heavy object off the ground. They knew they were clearing new ground. They knew they were carving out a frontier for mankind where no one had ever been before. But they certainly could not have foreseen how the airplane would change civilization, how those 12 seconds would change the world. Even they believed that it would never be possible to fly at night. But now, more than 100 years later, air travel, even space travel, is almost taken for granted. What advances we have made since 1903. And it all goes back to those brief, heart-stopping 12 seconds. There are times when we fail in our lives with Christ. We make so many mistakes. We might scratch our heads in disappointment with ourselves and wonder why we have stumbled one more time. And even though there have been wonderful saints of God who've influenced our lives for Christ, they've cleared the way for us, and yet we usually find that there is still something that we have to do. We have to go back to the basics. And that is what Paul is encouraging the Philippian Christians to do. He was concerned that they should advance in their spiritual growth. But before they could do that, they had to go back to the basics. Now, we've already looked at some of them, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because of time, but you'll notice in verses 3 through 4, he says one of those tools that we can use to clear the undergrowth so we can grow spiritually is joyful thanksgiving. And then he talks about in verses 5 through 9 a serious partnership with other Christians to make sure that we maintain that and that we're serious about it. In verse 9, he says we can advance in the faith when we utilize the tools that God has given us of knowledge, of depth of insight into the things of God. Verse 10, he says we need to only allow into our lives the things that are best, apply a test for the best, and then blameless living so that those who follow along behind us will not be tripped up by the briars and weeds of our lives. So, from personal experience, Paul knew these tools would soon grow dull unless they were sharpened. You know, a home gardener may have the most expensive garden tool available, and yet occasionally he has to stop and file it down so that it stays sharp enough to break through the hard ground. So, from Philippians 1, we continue our journey through Philippians 1. We continue clearing the path for spiritual growth. Here is the sixth tool that we've come to, and it's in verse 11. Tool number 6 is the fruit of righteousness. He says in verse 11 that we can be filled with the fruit of righteousness. Now, some have the wrong idea about what righteousness is. The mental image of a person who is righteous often is that of someone who looks down their nose at somebody else, at other people who are not as good, in quotation marks, as he is. But that's certainly not what Paul meant here, is it? Think about what fruit is. It is simply what a living tree or plant produces by doing what comes naturally. Okay? A peach tree doesn't have to go to seminars or workshops or strain and worry about producing fruit. It lives and therefore it produces peaches. Now, according to the Jews, the result of any particular action was called fruit. That might be good, that might be bad. In his letter to the Galatians, Paul noted some of the fruit or the results of the sinful nature. He says the sinful nature fruit is sexual immorality, impurity, idolatry, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissension, envy, and so on. And then he went on to list the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So this fruit of righteousness in Philippians 1 is simply the result of Christ at work in the life of the believer, doing what comes naturally to him. It's something that comes only when a person is involved in a vital relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. Paul says that's where this fruit of righteousness comes from, Jesus Christ. He is the source of our righteousness. We cannot manufacture it. We can't pretend to have it. It doesn't come from anything we do. It comes from a finished work of Jesus Christ on the cross. It comes from the dynamic of His power at work in us today, and it becomes available to us when we surrender ourselves to His sovereignty as Lord of our lives. Paul says that fruit of righteousness will be to the glory and praise of God. So, you want to grow spiritually? You want to chop your way through the jungle of everything that would interfere with your spiritual growth? That's the analogy that we've been following here. You need to make sure that you just let Jesus, you stay close to Jesus and let Him produce the fruit of the Spirit, the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ. Now, tool number 7 is in verses 12 and 13. And if we run out of time, and I want to tell you this ahead of time, because our brothers and sisters over at the Methodist Church are using the same FM frequency that we are. There's not a lot of them available in our area, and so this 88.1 is one that is free. And so we try to be out of here by 11:30 so they can pick up. They're starting their service a little bit late so that they can use the same radio frequency. So if I don't get finished today, then we'll just pick up next week. But I want to focus on this because I feel like this is something that we all are struggling with right now. The 7th tool is acceptance of God's will. Now listen carefully. There are few things that will impede our spiritual growth any more than ignorance of God's will, or even rebellion against God's will. For the conscientious Christian who wants to advance in his faith, his only alternative is to accept what God's doing in his life. Accept the will of God, even if we don't always understand what He's doing. Paul says in verse 12, "Now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel." Now you remember from previous messages, these messages kind of build one on top of the other. You remember the word advance there in verse 12. In the King James, it's the word furtherance. It's the word that means to clear the path of anything that would hinder the progress of an army. Okay? Now, Paul was in a Roman prison at the time he wrote this. By this time, he has been beaten, stoned, shipwrecked, snake-bitten, hungry, and cold. And he sums all of that up in the phrase, "What has happened to me?" Included all of that and more. He took the long look at his life and he saw that God had allowed certain things to happen to him so that the cause of Christ might be advanced. I'm sure that Paul remembered that he had always desired to preach in Rome. In fact, he talked about that in Acts chapter 19. I want to go to Rome. I want to preach the gospel in Rome. When he wrote his letter to the Romans, he hadn't been there yet. He said that he was eager to preach the gospel in the very heart of the Roman Empire so that all could know Christ. That's Romans 1:15. He had wanted to go to Rome as a preacher, but he wound up going to Rome as a prisoner. So what he's saying in Philippians 1:12, when he says, now I want you to know, brothers, what's happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. What he's saying is, being a prisoner is not quite what I had in mind when I said I wanted to preach the gospel in Rome. But these circumstances have actually meant that the gospel can advance even further than before. God has a plan. Now, how did his being in prison help to advance the gospel? Now, when we say prison, we're talking about him being in a Roman prison, not a United States federal penitentiary. We don't have time to get into how bad that was, but you remember, we've talked about it before, and you've studied in Sunday school. But when we say prison, I want you to think quarantine, because sometimes that's kind of what we felt like. In verse 13, Paul said, as a result, it has become known, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. The palace guard, let's talk about them, because that is so important to this particular point. The palace guard had been formed by the Roman emperor, the Caesar, named Augustus, after his uncle, Julius Caesar, had been assassinated. He didn't want the same thing to happen to him, so he formed this guard. It was an exclusive force of Roman soldiers, about 10,000 of the best soldiers that they could find, mounted soldiers, whose only loyalty was to the Caesar. They were compensated accordingly. They each received the rank of centurion, a special uniform, and double the pay of a regular soldier. They could be compared to our own Secret Service here in America. So instead of bemoaning the fact that he was in chains, Paul saw an amazing opportunity to share Christ with the most elite group of soldiers in the entire Roman Empire. He would have had that opportunity if he had gone to Rome any other way. Now just think of it. What other set of circumstances could have provided Paul with such an opportunity? He probably would have been chained to at least two of these hand-picked soldiers at a time. He would have unequaled opportunity to press the claims of Christ on these men almost one-on-one. And they couldn't escape until their shift was over. They couldn't go anywhere. They were the ones who were really captive, right? He said in verse 13, it has become known, or it has become clear. The word means to be conspicuous, to be open, so that everybody knows it. But listen, it gets better. It gets better. Historians tell us that this group of soldiers who served in the palace at Rome to protect the Caesar came from all over the empire. They served a certain number of years, and then they were usually reassigned back to their hometowns. Now get this. If any of these men became Christians while under Paul's witness, they then took the gospel of Christ to more villages and towns than Paul could have ever visited in his entire lifetime. God knew what he was doing, even by allowing Paul to be imprisoned. An anonymous author, or at least one unknown to me, once wrote, "For all the heartaches and the tears, for all the anguish and the pain, for gloomy days and fruitless years, and for the hopes that lived in vain, I do give thanks. For now I know these were the things that helped me grow." Now, folks, listen to me. We're going to stop right there. You may be struggling with what God's doing in your life and what God's doing in the world and what He's allowing in the world. I know sometimes I struggle with it, but then to be honest with you, my family has not been affected by this virus any more than, the fact that we had to wear masks and stay home and wash our hands more and, do all the right things. We've not, any of us, tested positive, is what I'm trying to say. And yet, sometimes I still struggle. God, what are you doing? Why are you allowing this? And I know that God has a plan. Studying for this message today, I put myself right there in that prison next to Paul, and I looked at him and I said, "Paul, how can you handle this?" And you know what Paul said to me? He said, "I can handle it because I know God's doing something. And I know He knows what He's doing, even if I don't. And I can trust Him. I've trusted Him all this time. I'm not going to stop now." If it should ever happen that something would happen in the world that would produce a lot of chaos and a lot of fear and uncertainty, if it should ever happen, we should be, of all people, like Paul. We should be the ones who say, "I trust God. I've trusted Him this far. I'm not going to stop now." Oh, wait a minute. It's happening right now. There's something happening in the world right now that's causing a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty and people wondering, what are we going to do? And how am I going to survive? And how am I going to live? And how am I going to pay my bills? And how am I going to do this? And we who know Christ should be the very ones to say, we trust God. We don't know what He's doing. We don't know why He's doing it, but we know we can trust Him. You want to grow in your spiritual life? This week, you spend some time hacking away at the briars of doubt and fear and uncertainty. You accept God's will for the world and God's will for our society and God's will for you personally. And you'll find that vegetation just falling away. Let me tell this real quick. When I was in seminary in New Orleans, I was on the staff at First Baptist Baton Rouge. And, there's a portion of the highway, the interstate, between New Orleans and Baton Rouge that goes over a lot of swamp. And so the interstate's raised up, it's built on a bridge going from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. And I remember noticing, I went over there twice a week, and I remember noticing that the trees that were growing out of the swamp and growing close to the bridge, close to the interstate, were all, there was a swath like this, where the highway department had come through with their vegetation killer, and they had sprayed right across the top of the railing on the bridge to keep the vegetation from coming over on the bridge. And they had killed it. That was brown and dead, and then right above it was green and alive. Listen, here's the analogy I want to make for you. You and I are on this highway, and we've got all this fear and doubt and everything, this unbelief and all of this chaos and this division in our country, all of it is just kind of creeping across and crawling into our lives. You take out your tool that God has given you of acceptance of God's will, and you hack away at all that stuff, and you'll find it falling away from you. And you can continue on your journey. God has a plan for you. He has a plan for me, and He has a plan for this country, and He has a plan for this world. And none of it is bigger than He is. Somebody say amen. Amen. Now, let's pray together, and then we will observe communion. Heavenly Father, we come to you today to thank you, Lord. To thank you that you are a great and powerful God who knows no equal. And so, Father, we ask in Jesus' name, you will help us. Help us to be the bright and shining witnesses so that it will be clear, the way it was clear in Paul's situation, that everybody will know. Everybody will know what our faith is. Everybody will know that we still trust you, even if we don't understand what's happening. Father, give us the courage. And anybody listening today, either here inside in the parking lot on Facebook or YouTube later, that, Father, they might be encouraged. They might be encouraged to keep their eyes on you, to walk with you, to use this acceptance of your will to hack away at any uncertainty. Thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, if you will take out your communion elements, we come here to celebrate or commemorate once again the death and triumphant resurrection of Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, those two go together, don't they? Paul said, I'm crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. It is co-death and co-resurrection that he's talking about. You know, Jesus said something that I think applies to us today, since it's been a year, more than a year, since we've observed communion here. Jesus said to his disciples, I have eagerly awaited the chance to eat this Passover meal with you, for soon I will have to suffer. And he was saying that the elements that he shared with them were symbols of what was actually to take place in the kingdom of God. Now you have your chalice, and others who are at home, you have whatever elements that you've been able to find. Turn it so that the wine or the grape juice is on the bottom, and then just peel that top piece off so that you're ready. By participating in the Lord's Supper, in communion, we are celebrating the fact that Christ actually did raise from the dead, that He gave Himself for us, that His body was broken for us. And Jesus told His disciples when He broke the bread and held it up and said, take and eat all of it. This is my body broken for you. In the same way, after supper, He passed the cup around and said, this cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you. Take and drink all of it. And Paul told us, whenever you eat this bread or drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until He comes. Let's stand now for our benediction, for our blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. Amen. I love you much. Call me if you need me. It's right over there on the end of the pew. I meant to say something about it and I forgot to.